I'm 42. Married for 11 years. 2 kids, a mortgage, a calendar full of school events and dentist appointments. The kind of life that feels boring in the safest way possible. Before all this, I would have said my marriage wasn't perfect, but it was solid. My wife, Lena, and I met in our late 20s. We grew up together in a way, careers, kids, grief, all of it. I trusted her completely. I never checked her phone. Never wondered where she was. Never imagined I'd be the kind of guy writing something like this anonymously on the internet. Back then, life felt predictable. Work, dinner, Netflix, arguing about dumb stuff like whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher. Normal problems. Safe problems. Lena decided to finally get her driver's license at 38. She'd always been anxious about driving, relied on me or public transport. I encouraged her. I was proud of her for facing a fear. I even joked that soon she wouldn't need me anymore. I didn't know that sentence would come back to haunt me. At the time, her lessons were just another item on the family schedule. Tuesdays and Thursdays. A driving school not far from our place. I trusted the process. I trusted her. I trusted everything. That's the part that hurts the most now. How normal everything felt before the ground disappeared under my feet. Looking back, the signs were there. That's the worst cliché, and I hate that it's true. Lena talked about her driving instructor more than I expected. Not constantly, but enough that his name stuck in my head. Mark says I'm improving. Mark thinks I'll pass on the first try. I teased her about having a crush on her teacher. She laughed it off. I laughed too. She started caring more about those lesson days. Dressing nicer. A little more makeup. I told myself it made sense. Confidence. Wanting to feel capable. I wanted to believe that. She also became oddly protective of her phone. Not dramatic, just subtle. Screen tilted away. Notifications silenced. Again, I ignored it. I didn't want to be that guy. Our intimacy changed, but not in a way that screamed affair. Just distracted. Like her mind was somewhere else sometimes. I chalked it up to stress, kids, life. Misplaced trust is quiet. It doesn't explode. It settles in and makes excuses for everything. I remember one night asking how the lesson went, and she snapped at me for interrogating her. That should have stopped me cold. Instead, I apologized. That's something I keep replaying, how often I apologized when I'd done nothing wrong. I was so invested in being supportive, understanding, reasonable, that I ignored the pit in my stomach telling me something was off. There was a day she came home unusually late from a lesson. Said traffic was bad. She smelled different. Not perfume, just different. I noticed it, and immediately hated myself for noticing. Another time, I walked into the room and she abruptly locked her phone. She smiled too quickly. What? She asked. I shrugged. Nothing. Friends sometimes ask how you didn't know. The truth is, I didn't want to know. Suspicion felt like betrayal of its own. She became defensive if I asked anything about the lessons. Why are you so obsessed? She said once. I remember feeling embarrassed, like I was being controlling. The instructor became this invisible third presence in our marriage, and I pretended not to see it. I trusted her because trusting her was easier than imagining my life without that trust. She passed her driving test on the first try. We celebrated. I took a photo of her holding the temporary license, smiling wide, proud. That photo still exists on my phone. I can't bring myself to delete it. I thought the chapter was closed. Lessons over. Back to normal. I didn't know the real story had already happened, and I was just late to it. The doubt didn't come during the lessons. It came after. Weeks later, she got a message while we were sitting together on the couch. I didn't see the screen, just the name that popped up before she turned it away. Mark. She froze for half a second. Tiny. Almost nothing. But I saw it. Why is your instructor texting you? I asked, trying to sound casual. He's just congratulating me again, she said. Too fast. That night I couldn't sleep. My brain started connecting dots I'd kept separate on purpose. Why would he still be texting? Why was she nervous? I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself I was paranoid. But once a doubt takes root, it grows quietly. Over the next few days, I noticed more messages. Short exchanges. Deleted histories. She started taking calls outside. When I asked directly if something was going on, she got angry. Accused me of not trusting her. Cried. Asked how I could think so little of her. I backed down. I wish I hadn't. That was the moment the door opened. I just didn't know how far it would swing. I found out by accident. That's the part that still feels unreal. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower. A message preview popped up. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't trying to be that guy. The message said, I still think about that day in the car. My hands started shaking before my brain caught up. I opened the phone. I knew her passcode. I always had. She never changed it because she never thought she had to. The conversation wasn't long. Some messages had clearly been deleted. But what remained was enough. References to what she did for him. Jokes that weren't jokes. A line that burned into my head. You earned that license, winky face. I felt like I was floating. Like I was watching someone else read those words. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smiling like everything was normal, I almost threw up. I asked her to sit down. She looked at my face and knew instantly. Tell me, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Tell me what happened in that car. She didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. I didn't plan it, she said finally, staring at the floor. I remember laughing. A sharp, broken sound. That's not an answer. She started crying. Real crying. Shaking. Saying my name over and over like it could pull her out of the moment. She told me she was afraid of failing the test. That he hinted he could help. That it only happened once. That it didn't mean anything. She said the words like they were technicalities. I asked her directly if she slept with him. She nodded. I felt something inside me shut off. Like a breaker flipping. With the guy who was supposed to teach you how to drive? I asked. She said yes. I asked if it was during a lesson. She said yes. I asked if that's how she passed. She didn't answer. That was worse than any confession. I stood up. My legs barely worked. I remember thinking about the kids' backpacks by the door, the normal clutter of our life, and how none of it fit anymore. She kept saying she was sorry. That it was a mistake. That she loved me. I remember thinking, you loved me while you did this. Shock is quiet at first. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like my skin didn't fit. Then it hit all at once. Anger. Humiliation. Disgust. A deep, aching sadness I didn't know I could feel. I kept replaying images I didn't want. Her in the car. His hands. The power imbalance. The choice she made. I felt stupid. Like everyone else in the world must have known except me. She tried to touch me. I pulled away so hard she flinched. I went outside and vomited in the yard. That night I slept on the couch. I barely slept at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that winking emoji. I felt ashamed for even existing in my own house. Part of me wanted to pack a bag and disappear. Another part wanted to pretend it never happened. Either part won. The next day was worse. We talked for hours. Or maybe it just felt like hours. Time didn't work right anymore. She minimized. It was just sex. As if that made it better. She blamed fear. Stress. Him. The situation. At one point she said, You don't know how hard it is to feel powerless. I almost lost it. You weren't powerless, I said. You chose. She asked me not to tell anyone. Begged me. Said it would ruin her. I remember thinking, what about me? She swore it was over. Swore she'd blocked him. Swore she'd do anything. I asked why she didn't tell me after. She said she wanted to protect our family. That word, protect, felt like a slap. By the end, we were both exhausted, hollowed out. Nothing was resolved. Everything was broken. The emotional fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, unpredictable and cruel. At first, I felt numb. I could function. I went to work, answered emails, nodded in meetings. People joked with me and I laughed at the right moments. On the outside, I looked fine. On the inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made me me and left a shell that just moved on autopilot. Then the numbness cracked. I started replaying everything. Every memory suddenly felt suspicious. Every late night she said she was tired. Every time she'd been distant, and I'd assumed stress. I tortured myself wondering when it started, not just the affair, but the emotional shift. Was she already gone before she got into that car? Or did the car become the moment she left me? I felt humiliated in a way I can't fully explain. It wasn't just that she cheated, it was how. That detail poisoned everything. The transactional nature of it. The imbalance of power. The fact that she didn't just betray me emotionally but tied it to something that now followed us everywhere. Her license, her independence, her freedom. Every time she drove, it felt like proof of what she'd done. I also hated myself for still loving her. That confused me more than the anger. I wanted to hate her cleanly, decisively. Instead, I loved her and resented her at the same time, and that combination was exhausting. Loving her made me feel weak. Resenting her made me feel cruel. I started questioning my worth. I wondered if I was boring. Predictable. Too safe. If she needed something I couldn't give. I knew intellectually that her choice was her responsibility, but emotionally, I kept looking for the flaw in myself that made it possible. Some nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my chest was physically collapsing inward. Other nights I slept for 12 hours and still woke up tired. I lost weight without trying. Food tasted like cardboard. Music I used to love felt intrusive. The worst part was realizing that even if I stayed, even if I forgave her, I would never again experience my marriage the way I once did. That innocence was gone. And grief for that version of my life hit me harder than the anger ever could. We didn't tell the kids. That decision felt automatic at first, like instinct. Protect them. Preserve normalcy. Don't shatter their sense of safety. But silence has weight. And carrying it every day nearly crushed me. Our kids were old enough to notice shifts but too young to understand them. They sensed tension in the pauses between conversations, in the way we avoided eye contact, and how laughter disappeared from the house without explanation. They started asking small questions that felt enormous. Why don't you and Mom sit together anymore? Why is everyone so quiet? I lied constantly. Soft lies. Careful lies. Lies wrapped in reassurance. And each one made me feel like I was failing them in a new way. At night, after they went to bed, I'd sit alone and imagine what would happen if they knew. If they understood that their parents weren't unbreakable. That love wasn't always safe. That adults made choices that hurt people deeply. I worried about modeling the wrong lesson, about staying when you're hurt, about accepting betrayal for the sake of stability. But I also worried about modeling abandonment, about blowing up their world because I couldn't handle my pain. Every morning I put on the mask again. Packed lunches. Helped with homework. Asked about their day. The routine felt surreal, like I was acting in a life that no longer belonged to me. Sometimes my son would hug me out of nowhere, and I'd have to bite my tongue to keep from crying. I felt like I was failing him by not being fully present, by being emotionally fractured. The house became a stage. We played our roles convincingly. But behind the scenes, everything was cracked. And the longer we stayed silent, the heavier the secret became. We went to counseling because it felt like the right thing to do. The responsible thing. The adult thing. At first, I was hopeful. The therapist was calm, neutral, reassuring. She talked about accountability, rebuilding trust, communication. She asked my wife to take responsibility, and Lena did, at least verbally. I know I hurt him. I know it was my choice. I'll do whatever it takes. Those words sounded good. Comforting, even. But words are easy when the damage is already done. In therapy, I talked about the images I couldn't escape. About the humiliation. About how every time she drove, my stomach clenched. Lena cried. Apologized. Promised transparency. Gave me access to everything: phone, location, schedules. And yet trust didn't come back. It didn't even start to. I realized something terrifying. Trust isn't rebuilt through effort alone. It requires belief. And I no longer believed in the version of her I had married. Some sessions ended with us holding hands, cautiously hopeful. Others ended with me feeling angrier than when I arrived. The therapist asked what I needed to heal, and I didn't know how to answer. Nothing felt sufficient. I wasn't sure if counseling was helping us or just prolonging the inevitable. What scared me most was realizing that forgiveness felt like erasing myself. Like telling my pain it didn't matter enough to change anything. And I wasn't sure I could live with that. I didn't tell my friends. Not my family. Not anyone. Partly because I was embarrassed. Partly because I didn't want people to hate her. And partly because once you say something out loud, it becomes real in a way you can't undo. So I carried it alone. At work, people complained about small relationship problems, and I smiled politely while screaming internally. At family gatherings, I watched Lena laugh with relatives and wondered if they'd look at her differently if they knew. I started withdrawing socially. It was easier than pretending everything was fine. Easier than answering questions about my marriage. Loneliness crept in slowly. Not the absence of people, but the absence of being known. No one knew what I was carrying. No one knew how close I was to breaking on any given day. I spent a lot of time in my car, just sitting there, not ready to go inside or leave. I felt suspended between lives, my old one and whatever this was becoming. I'd never felt so invisible. Time passed. Months turned into years. From the outside, we looked okay. Stable. Married. Functional. Inside, everything was different. Trust never fully returned. It became conditional, cautious. I noticed things I never used to notice. I questioned things I never used to question. That carefree sense of security was gone. Intimacy changed. It was slower, more deliberate, sometimes strained. There were moments of closeness, but they were fragile, easily disrupted by memory. I became more guarded, not just with her, but with everyone. Betrayal rewires you. It teaches you that safety is temporary. I didn't like who I was becoming, but I didn't know how to stop. We stayed together. Not because everything healed. Not because it worked out. We stayed because leaving felt just as terrifying as staying. Because of the kids. Because of shared history. Because starting over at this age felt impossible. But our marriage is quieter now. More careful. Less spontaneous. We coexist. We cooperate. We function. Something essential never came back. I think often about the version of me before I knew. He trusted easily. He felt safe in his own home. He believed love protected you from this kind of pain. I miss him. I don't know if staying was strength or fear. I don't know if leaving would have saved me or destroyed something else. What I do know is that betrayal doesn't end when the affair ends. It lingers. It reshapes you. If you're reading this and ignoring red flags because you don't want your life to change, I understand. I really do. Just know that sometimes the truth changes you whether you're ready or not. And once it does, you never fully go back.